Good afternoon. Can you hear me from Jerusalem?
Good afternoon. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
I wanted to do a quick sound check and video check.
Yes, for the video, how is the screen? Should I bring it a little bit further down like this?
Like this, it's okay. It's okay. If I can ask you to remove behind you, there's a trash bin as well as a bag. We can see in the background anything that would.
I'll take everything off. Okay, thank you.
Do I need to control anything from here, or will you do all that?
No, we do as usual. If there are questions online, you give the floor and we'll open the mics.
When I speak, do I need to click on and off here?
Yes.
And it's webcast, so we start on the dot. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Jamie. Just wanted to do a quick sound check with you directly. Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Yes, I can hear you. If you sit the way you're going to sit comfortably and looking at the webcam, can you
Yeah.
just say one sentence, please?
Say that again, sorry.
One sentence, one full sentence, just to make sure that we.
Okay, people in Gaza have the right to more than meager charity dropped from the sky. Okay.
Thank you. I'll mute you now, and I will ask you to unmute when Jens gives you the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this press briefing, which is hosted out of the UN headquarters in Geneva. We have with us today Jamie McGoldrick, who is with us in his capacity as humanitarian coordinator ad interim for the occupied Palestinian territory. He joins us from Jerusalem, and I can see Jamie on the screen there. We have half an hour, after which he has another commitment, so we will stick to that. Mr. McGoldrick will set us off with some introductory remarks, and then we'll take your questions, either those who are in the room or online. Just raise your hand, and we'll get to you in the order that you raise your hand. So with that, I will hand over to Mr. McGoldrick in Jerusalem.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jens. I was in Rafah, Gaza last week. I went there on my usually weekly visit for 2 days. I spent some time in Rafah before heading to Gaza, to the north, Gaza City. I hadn't been in Gaza City since 2019, and I went back this time to have a look at the conditions there, to go to Shifa Hospital, etc. I was shocked by the state of the buildings and the conditions of the roads and the infrastructure. I didn't recognize any landmark and I was there regular up until 2019, 2020. So it was incredible, the amount of its industrial scale destruction of that place. We spoke to a lot of people there regarding how to get more aid into Gaza because it's been without aid for such a long time. There's been very, very little in the way of convoys of food aid and other medical supplies or fuel into Gaza. And I wanted to hear from some of the community leaders and some of the NGOs there to find out how the situation was for them. And we came up with hopefully some way forward how to improve the security and the distribution of goods inside Gaza. As you know, there have been a lot of looting and self-distribution has been taking place at Kuwaiti Junction and elsewhere by young men in particular. And a lot of the aid is not getting through to the most vulnerable. So that was one thing. I think we're making some headway on how we can make that happen. The second thing I did was when I was there, I went to Shifa Hospital. I used to go there regular, especially during the Great March and Return. And I met with Dr. Marwan and his colleagues there and saw myself firsthand the conditions inside the hospital. The hospital has been badly affected by the hostilities. And we hear today again, there is more hostilities in and around the hospital as well. There was quite a lot of displaced people there, although a lot less than I expected. I visited the operational parts of the hospital, which there are not many, because they are running on very little fuel, and the generators they used to conserve energy, use only sparingly in some parts of the hospital. But the places that I went to were obviously the emergency room and places where people are recovering, and the operation rooms. That's the sort of three areas that were the mostly functioning. While I was in the Shifa Hospital, there was a young man lying on the floor who'd just been shot in both legs. He was lying on the floor. There was no bed space for him. He was then later carried in a blanket to the operating theatre where he was operated on. I then went around some of the other hospital areas to see people who had recovered from injuries and who had been affected by the hostilities. There's a young girl there who you couldn't recognize her face. She was so badly burned. She had been caught up in an airstrike, and it burned the building she was in, and she and her siblings were injured, and some of them died. I then went next to another young girl she was Down syndrome, and she was on the bed with her mother. And she had an infection in her lungs, which her lungs were basically filling up with fluid. And in fact, she was drowning in her own body. And there was no way. The doctors were there trying to find a way of addressing her issues, but they couldn't. The only way it could be done is to be transferred to another hospital. And because the mother was on her own and she had her own children, other children, she couldn't understand or couldn't work out a way of taking that child to another place. So bottom line is that child will not survive much longer. In Rafah itself, every time I go there, you normally see it getting more and more congested in the urban area. But surprisingly now you see the numbers going down because people are fearing the possibility of a Rafah incursion. And that will be a real worry for them, obviously, who are moving away to Al-Mawasi and other areas. Al-Mawasi currently has about 400,000 IDPs, displaced people. So it's not an area that can accommodate many more people who'll come there. And the other thing is the fact that this is the entry point for all of our assistance into Gaza. And if there was to be an incursion, that would be that system we have, which is already precarious and intermittent would then be broken. And the fact that we don't have much in the way of a lot of stocks inside Gaza, because the supply chain is so weak, that for us to build up stocks is virtually impossible. As soon as the goods come in, the 200 trucks a day or whatever the case may be, it's not enough to satisfy the numbers that we have to address. And so as soon as goods come in, they don't get stored anywhere for very long. They're 2 or 3 days stock at any point in time, and we then distribute them either in the southern part of Gaza or to the north. And so it would be a really difficult scenario for us to envisage the possibility of hundreds of thousands of people being forced from Rafah because of the incursion to go to other areas. We are not in a position to contingency plan that. We're not in a position to pre-position shelter material, food, medical supplies, and especially water during this very, very hot period. So it will be a real problem for us. And we've heard, you know, lots of stories in the press now about they call these humanitarian islands. And that's meant to be some sort of plan that the Israeli authorities have to move people from Rafah for the incursion and move to these areas. Well, for us, that's not something the UN will participate in because we're not part of any forced displacement. However, we know that if people do move, we'll have to follow them and bring as much attention and support as we can, however difficult that will be. The environment we're working is very, very uncertain. It's unstable. We're not sure how to plan for more than 48 hours, 72 hours because of the uncertainties there. And with the fear of a Rafah incursion, it makes it all the more difficult. If there is some sort of humanitarian pause or some sort of ceasefire in the future, obviously we'd like to exploit that. But again, because of the very low number of trucks that we get in, the 200 trucks is far smaller than the 500 before October 7, and with very little in the way of private sector, it'll be very difficult for us to actually do anything meaningful unless we can scale up very, very quickly. And that means opening up as many borders as we possibly can. It means getting the fence road, the military road, that to be more operational than it is. It's already started. To have the beach roads and also the middle road, which is Sakladin Road, to be fully working. And then Kerem Shalom itself would have to be increased in capacity. It's limited because of the scanning possibilities they have there. They can scan about 250, 300 trucks a day. We would have to get them work more hours in the day and allow us to bring more trucks in there. And at the same time, there's a need for more additional crossing points. Ashdod in the north, coming directly into the north, would be a real help because you can scan in Ashdod and allow the stuff to come in and inspections taking place there. And equally, if we could get the Jordan pipeline opened in a much bigger way than it is at the moment, we're roughly about 50 trucks a week and we need about 20 or 30 trucks a day. Those trucks can be scanned directly in Amman or in Allenby, and then can come directly by road and use the military road without coming through Kerem Shalom. And that way, I think it would help us greatly in the sense of it would help us bring more in and without clogging or log jamming what's happening in Kerem Shalom. We hear and we see a lot of news about airdrops, and we see this idea of maritime as possibilities. We would have to say that, you know, the only real way to get heavy loads of material, food and others into all parts of Gaza was only by road. Air and maritime are not alternatives. They're probably additions to the roads, but they can't be seen as alternatives to. So we have to put that in perspective. We were lucky yesterday that the military road on the east side of Gaza was open for us to have 18 trucks from WFP and others to deliver assistance into the north. And that was very helpful, but it's not consistent because like on Thursday last week, we had 16 trucks lined up and they were then postponed and that road wasn't to be able to use until the Sunday. So we have to get all roads open and get all opportunities open for us to actually do more into the current situation. But at the same time, to do it in a way that it actually exploits the possibility of a humanitarian pause or best place us in a way that we can deal with any Rafah incursion that takes place. We know that the IPC report is coming out, and we see that that report shows quite clearly that more than half the population, about 1.1 million people, have exhausted all of their food supplies. And we also see that a case where the IPC methodology and the science and the used in that is being used in so many places in other parts of the world, and it's been seen as a well-tested and well-used and very reliable way of measuring what's happening in terms of food insecurity of populations in difficult circumstances. And this one actually records the highest number of people facing catastrophic hunger ever recorded by an IPC anywhere at any time in the world. So it shows you the severity of that, especially in the north part of the country, where over 70% of the people are in real difficult circumstances there. And then it should also be noted that there's no surprise, because we haven't had any great deal of sufficient stable food supplies and other supplies into the north for months. And that on top of living extremely squalid, unsanitary conditions, with hospitals partly functioning, with people relying on less than 1 litre per person of clean water a day, it's no surprises that those numbers are there. And the numbers they're saying is that if we don't address these problems, don't address them properly, that famine is imminent by sometime in May. And it can be halted, and we have to use all best methods we have at our disposal, which is all the trucks that we can get in there, all openings that need to be there, and hopefully that will be the case. We also need significant supplies of fuel for water and sanitation, for ensuring that the hospitals can continue to function in a way that's better than is the case at the moment. And we also have to have, as a UN, in order for us and our partners to do our work, we have to create an enabling environment for us to operate in. That's with safety and with deconfliction, and with the ability for us to deliver assistance quickly and clearly into the area itself. We have to get more food in there and prevent desperation from creating insecurity and self-distribution and looting. So that's what's the thing we have to do. So I think I'll stop there and take questions if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I have 3 on my list, but first we go to the room for a question here. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Satoko Adachi. I work for Yomiuri Shimbun. I want to ask about the deconfliction, especially the northern Gaza. I understand that the Palestinian police forces in Gaza have stepped down because they are being targeted by the Israelis. So who is actually escorting the humanitarian aid convoy that actually going into the north? And how is the aid distribution actually working in the north? Thank you.
Shall I take them one by one, or?
Yes, please, Jamie.
Okay then. Yeah, on the question regarding deconfliction, yeah, we've been trying to get the blue police back on track again. As you know, there have been a number of incidents where the blue police have been targeted by Israel because they regard them as part of the Hamas infrastructure. So we are trying to find the best way suitable to have delivery of assistance into the north and other parts of Gaza Strip. That's a combination of using community groups, etc., and where we can use the police in a discreet manner as well. In terms of escorting aid into the north, we used the military road yesterday, and that's on the Israeli side, and we used the IDF up to the point we came to Gaza, and then we continued ourselves independently, and then delivered the actual aid up through Sakladin Road to where we offloaded it to various groups. The distribution right now it takes a number of different things. There's ongoing self-distribution, as you know, in some of these places like Kuwaiti Junction. But in this case here, we were able to bring the rest of the trucks to Gaza City and to Jabalia. We are working with the community leaders. We're working with local NGOs and local groups to set up distribution systems so that we can make sure that we reach all the families concerned.
Thank you. Then we'll go online first to Jamie Keaton from Associated Press, and after that to Nick from the New York Times. But first over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jens, and thank you, Mr. McGoldrick, for coming to see us. I just wanted to, I kind of came in and out, but I just wanted to, obviously you've seen the IPC findings today in the World Food Program comments about famine being imminent. And I just wanted to try to find out specifically what can be done to avert that eventuality? I know that you kind of touched upon this, but if that was your priority number one for North Gaza, what can be done to avert that eventuality? And if I could just add in, what could you describe a little bit about how it works with the Israeli authorities? I mean, are they changing the goalposts? Are they giving you like extremely difficult criteria to be able to ship food in from Israel proper? Just can you kind of give us a description as to what they're telling you is preventing the shipment of food in particular and water into North Gaza? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, actually, the IPC mentions that famine is imminent if the steps are not taken. But I would also say that for a lot of young children there, especially the under twos who have shown some serious signs of malnutrition, dehydration, and anemia in pregnant mothers and new mothers, I think that the damage to the development potential of a lot of these young people has probably been affected, and something they might never ever recover from and reach their full potential. But I think that what can be done is what should be done is that we have to open up the gates of all roads and all possibilities to get food in from Ashdod into the north, to use the military road, the middle road, and to use the coast road to expand the possibilities of private sector in as well, so that we can get back to close to the 500 trucks a day we need rather than the 200 or so we have at the moment. Unless we can put significant supply increases into those areas, those people who are at catastrophic levels of malnutrition or food insecurity will face real serious problems and imminent death if that's not the case. We have to have, and it's not just food, it's health support, it's water, it's nutritional targeting, especially of vulnerable groups like some young children. In terms of the Israeli authorities, we've started to work with them to, as you can see, we've got one new road open up, the military road, and we're trying to encourage them to allow us to get the middle road, the Sakladin road. And it's only through those discussions that we can assure ourselves of getting more food into the north. And then at the same time, we have to find ways of expanding the entry point of goods into Kerem Shalom. Kerem Shalom is the only avenue we have right now of bringing food directly in from the outside, from Rafah, from elsewhere, Amman, into Gaza. And it's significantly not enough. The scanning capacity is only up to 200, 300 trucks a day. So we have to find ways of expanding that or getting alternatives. The alternatives are Ashdod and in Allenby in Jordan, where you can use Israeli scanners, can use those to inspect the trucks and then send them in directly without having to come round through Kerem Shalom again. And that's the way we have to move.
Thank you very much, Nick Cumming-Bruce, and after that, Emma Farge from Reuters.
Yeah, thank you for taking the question. I wondered first if you could just say a little bit about what you have heard from Israeli authorities about you mentioned islands where people could move from Rafah. What are the Israeli authorities telling you about that, and how do you have any sense of a plan on their part to get people to move to these islands, and when that's likely to be implemented? Secondly, people have been talking about the need to open all these roads and access points for weeks now. Why is Ashdod not open? Why is the military road not being used consistently? And what is holding up the delivery of aid from Allenby at this point? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, the humanitarian islands, we haven't heard too much about, other than what we've seen in the media. We haven't had a briefing on these yet. We've had in the talk before on some other possibilities. There was humanitarian tented villages, and now this is the new humanitarian islands. I honestly don't know where they are supposedly being established, for who they'll be established. Is it north of the Wadi Gaza or south of the Wadi Gaza? And how will they move people from wherever they are now to these villages? It will be pushed, forced, encouraged, or will it just because of evacuation? If the evacuation of the incursion takes place in Rafah, to be honest with you, I don't know that there's enough tents in the worldwide market to accommodate people, and I don't know if there's enough space being created for anything to accommodate a number that we might see coming out of Rafah. So we're hoping to get more information on what those plans are for the Rafah incursion, and see if there's any possibility of us being better prepared in order for us to pre-position material in areas, but I would say it's a big ask from that side. I mean, we've been calling, as you said, opening for all the roads and including all the entry points around and into Gaza. Ashdod, I think, is partly because of, you know, there's a sort of an optic of seeing that goods come in from Israel from Ashdod. But it's a well-functioning port. We've used it in the past for decades when we use it for supplying material into Gaza. And I hope it's something that comes back on stream again, because it would be a massive improvement to the numbers of trucks that we get in at this point in time. And geographically and proximity-wise, it's so close to Gaza, it would make perfect sense. On the military road, I said we've just started using that road, and it is, as you know, a military road, so it's been used for other purposes other than humanitarian. And so IDF has to accommodate us to use that road. So it's going to be something we will work slowly with, but hopefully we can get a chance to use that in a way that will help benefit the UN and other partners to deliver systems quicker into Gaza, because that military road doesn't suffer the same congestion and insecurity as you go through the coast road or the Saladin road inside Gaza itself. And hopefully Amman, Jordan and the Allenby could be something again that gets ramped up. And we're looking forward to Sigrid Kaag, maybe her efforts to try and get that unlocked at some point in the near future as well.
Thank you, Jamie. Over to Emma Farge from Reuters and Imogen after that.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, a clarification, please, on what you mentioned about security and community groups. We're hearing about new popular committees, which are sort of Palestinian clans and factions, often wearing masks, taking it upon themselves to secure aid to the north. Are we talking about the same thing? And if not, could you just clarify a bit? And secondly, I'm wondering about rejected aid building up in warehouses in Al Arish. Just wondering, is this a growing problem? Do you know how many tons are there? And are you raising this with Israeli authorities? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, maybe just on that, we raise it every single minute of every day we get the chance to. We have a focal point in our office who takes it up all the time with the Israeli authorities. You're right, in Al Arish there is critical humanitarian items that are there, and we've been finding it quite difficult to get some key issues or key commodities in, and sometimes these include medical equipment, sometimes they include water and sanitation spare parts and chemicals to treat water for the distribution. And then one of the bigger areas is the power generation, either through actual generators themselves or solar panels. We find it very difficult to get those in because they're seen in the eyes of Israel as dual use. We'll continue to work with them and hopefully we can get that addressed, because there's a massive amount of goods in Al Arish warehouse and we are paying storage for it, or not us, donor funding is paying storage for it. So we're hopefully going to get a chance to actually get a way of addressing how we can take all of the items out, which are, if they weren't there, we wouldn't be ordering them. We need them because they're part and parcel of our operations, and our operations are suffering accordingly, especially for powering and water and sanitation and the health elements as well. On your question regarding the clans and families, we're not working with clans and families in the different parts of Gaza, both north and south. We're working with local NGOs. There's a PNGO, it's PINGO, the Palestine National NGO body that we work closely with. We've had a partnership with them for a long time, and there's about 30 or 40 accredited members that we work with. And where they are not present in the north, for example, we try to look for people who worked with NGOs before, and we work with some of the local organizations and the community-based organizations, where we can actually use that to be much more getting good proximity to those people who need assistance, and we use them directly.
Thank you, Jamie. Over to Imogen Folks from the BBC, and after that, Musa from Al Mayadeen.
Hi, thanks very much for taking my question. Two questions, I'm afraid. You talked about an enabling environment. Now, UNRWA, of course, has the biggest infrastructure for humanitarian work in Gaza. Can it still function? Because, I mean, there's two things I've heard, and my colleagues as well, from Israeli diplomats, is One, they don't want to work with UNRWA anymore. And the other is to do with enabling environment. Israeli diplomats tell us that Israel has no limits on the aid that can go into Gaza. You've been telling us quite compellingly that Pentagon is showing us a very different picture. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, maybe on the first one on UNRWA. I mean, clearly UNRWA has been there for decades, and it is the backbone of all that we do in terms of infrastructure, delivery, distribution, even down to ID cards and the food supply. So it's an essential part of any operation that we have on the ground. And to do anything to that, to sort of curtail it or to hobble it, would cause us some real serious issues in terms of our ability to serve where we can the populations in need. So from our point of view, we see UNRWA and the systems that UNRWA provide, both to the UN family and the broader humanitarian community, as a critical component for us, our ability to address the catastrophe and the tragic humanitarian needs that are there. On your the second question, the enabling environment, you know, if there was an enabling environment which was complete, why would we be discussing the limited road connections in there at the moment? We've only just been able to get the military road open up. The Sakladin road is not open at all, and we only have the coastal road, which has been opened all this time. But there is a checkpoint at the Wadi Gaza, and we have a holding area where we've been kept many times, and it has caused us problems in deconfliction. And so the supply into the north has not been something that we've been able to address properly because of some of these restrictions. There's also, you know, and if there was an enabling environment complete, then why would we have the Al Arish store, which is full of items which have been prevented from coming in? And these are medical items, water and sanitation items. There's nothing in there which is a threat. And so I would say that, and then also say that we ourselves, we have put staff in situations where we're only now just getting enough armored vehicles to move around. And secondly, we haven't been allowed by Israel to bring in sufficient ability for us to communicate with each other. We are sending people on convoys to the north into quite hostile areas, and we have no means of tracking them, have no means of talking to them if something untoward was to happen. So while Israel talks about an enabling environment, I just have to point out some of those facts to you.
Thank you very much. Musa and Mayadeen.
Merci, Jens. My question regarding the delivering aid by sea from Cyprus to Gaza. How do you see this process? There is some difference between before and then concerning the food situation in Gaza. And when you talk about the famine, can you be please very clear about the situation? Which risk we have today with the famine? We are across the famine, or the Gaza, especially in northern of Gaza, there is the famine exists. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. On the question regarding the maritime issue, there are three maritime elements. There's the first one, which was this weekend, which is the World Central Kitchen, which brought a boat of 200 metric tons. That was 10 truckloads, and that went south to Deir Bali. There is another one that's coming on track in the next couple of weeks, which is the one that President Biden mentioned, was called the floating harbour. And that's something which is meant to allow goods to be brought on shore from some sort of temporary harbour established out on the sea, and trucks will come in. And then the third one is the longer standing one, which is the Al Mathea project. It's something which Cyprus is currently having meetings this week on to discuss how that can be established. That will take some months and much longer term. I don't see the maritime as being an alternative to the roads, and that's something we have to get away from. I would say in some cases, maybe it's a bit of a form of a humanitarian public relations in some of these issues. The roads are the only way you can move massive amounts of food, which are needed in the north and elsewhere. And the roads have to be cleared, and we all to use all the roads rather than building a new port. If we have Ashdod port in the north is quite close to Gaza, I don't understand why we need to build another port when that one's there. And I would say that from our point of view, we would rather spend time getting the roads opened, getting the roads graded, because they've been heavily destroyed by the military activity and by the weather. And we'd also have to look at the unexploded ordnance to be removed as well. And having all roads and all entry points to the north and elsewhere open, that's the best way to address the humanitarian crisis. The famine that you mentioned is imminent, as the report indicates. It will be coming up sometime, if conditions exist and continue, sometime between now and the middle of May, according to that there. I think that there are many border crossings into Gaza, and yet we barely see a trickle of aid. And that's been interrupted so many times. The obvious crossings remain largely closed to the humanitarian assistance, and nothing moves aid faster and in greater volume to a population in need than a fleet of heavy trucks and the use of all the roads that are available to us. So we would encourage that to be the conversation rather than be distracted by something else.
Thank you, Jamie. I hope we can keep you just for a couple of more minutes so we can give the floor to Robbie from AFP.
Okay, last question. I have to go.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. I was hoping that you could describe the sanitation conditions that you observed in Rafah and elsewhere during your recent visit. What problems is the lack of garbage collection, garbage disposal creating after more than 5 months now? And is there any kind of plan or capacity to address it? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, sanitation is one of the key drivers for the nutritional crisis, the health crisis, and I would even say the food insecurity as well. People are hungry, but they're even more hungry because they're not at good conditions. Their immune systems are being affected by the living conditions. People are living very squalid, overcrowded conditions, with very little in the way of potable water that they can afford to buy or it can be delivered to them, especially in some areas. And these squalid conditions have turned out where you've got, with surveys we do in families, they see that the prevalence of diarrhea or stomach infections that are happening. There's also the fact that you get hepatitis A breakout, which is a clear indication of overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. And in terms of garbage collection, there is no garbage collection. Basically, at the side of the camps, at the side of the roads, there are piles of used, papers, plastic, tins, remnants of food, etc. And that lies there, and it is obviously it will create worse conditions in terms of sanitation. We have to find a way, and I know some of the UN agencies are looking to find a way of taking that the garbage disposal and taking it, UNICEF and others, UNDP, and hopefully there'll be a possibility of having a system in place that takes that away, because it just adds to the problems of lack of food, lack of access of health, lack of real targeted nutrition for children, therapeutic and supplementary feeding, and ultimately just the lack of good clean water and sanitation. And because the power plants are not working, and because of the water and sanitation systems are broken or in need of repair, we don't have the ability to turn that into something which is better than the current situation.
Thank you so much, Jamie, for your time. We will let you go now.
Thanks a lot.
So thanks to Jerusalem.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone following online. And that wraps it up here from Geneva. Thank you.
Recording stopped.